AI isn't threatening your future. You already lost it. You just haven't gotten the notification yet. In 1900, New York City had one horse for every 3 humans. They didn't disappear overnight. They simply stopped being necessary. And the most terrifying part, they had no idea. They were still working, still being fed, still being loved, right up until they weren't. Imagine this. You open your laptop in the morning, there's another headline about AI. Something about a model that now writes code, reads X-rays, passes the bar exam. You skim it. You feel a vague discomfort somewhere between your chest and your stomach. And then you close the tab. And you tell yourself, that's not about me. I'll figure it out when it actually matters. That's not laziness. That's not ignorance. That's not you failing to keep up. That is a completely normal nervous system response to a threat that is too large, too abstract, and too fast-moving to process in one sitting. The brain is not designed to engage with dangers it cannot act on today. It disengages. It protects you from paralysis by pretending the problem isn't urgent. Evolutionarily brilliant. In the age of AI, a death sentence in slow motion. And here's what I want you to hear before we go any further. You are not the problem. The problem is that nobody sat you down and explained the rules of a game that started without your permission. Nobody told you that the shift was already happening while you were busy living your life. Nobody told you that closing the tab was not neutral. It was a choice, and choices, even unconscious ones, have consequences. This video is not here to scare you. It's here to name what's already happening, because the horse that sees the automobile is already a different horse. There is a distinction that most people building AI have never seriously confronted, and their failure to confront it is not a technical oversight. It is a philosophical blind spot that changes everything downstream. The distinction is between complicated and complex. A complicated system is a jet engine, a semiconductor, a computer processor running billions of operations per second. Complicated systems have enormous depth, but they are fundamentally deterministic. You can, in principle, map every input to every output, press a button, get a result, scale the system, get a proportionally scaled result. Mastering complicated systems is what made Silicon Valley rich and confident. A complex system is something else entirely. It's an immune system, a financial market, a rainforest, a civilization. In complex systems, components interact, and from those interactions, entirely new properties emerge that were not present in any individual component. You cannot predict the behavior of a complex system by studying its parts. The parts are not the point. The interactions are the point, and interactions are the point. And interactions, by definition, produce surprises. The people building AI spent their careers mastering complicated systems. They are extraordinary at it. And when they look at large language models, at neural networks, at systems that learn from interaction, they see a very large, very impressive complicated system. One they built, one they understand. Let's call this the master's trap. The better you are with a hammer, the more everything starts to look like a nail. And the more you've built things that behave predictably, the harder it becomes to viscerally believe that you've now built something that doesn't. This looks like a technical misunderstanding between engineers, a categorization error, something that can be corrected in the next version. But there is one thing we haven't named yet, and it explains why the smartest, most cautious people in the history of technology are building something they openly admit they're afraid of, and why they cannot stop. Bret Weinstein, evolutionary biologist, someone who spent 30 years studying how complex systems evolve, spiral, and collapse, sits across from Amjad Masad, the CEO of Replit, one of the most influential AI development platforms on the planet. This is not a theoretical debate between academics. This is a man who understands complex systems from the inside, looking directly at a man who is actively building one and telling him to his face, Your confidence about what this system can and cannot do is fundamentally misplaced. You had stepped without noticing into the realm of the truly complex, and in the truly complex, your confidence should drop to near zero. Masad pushes back. He says he knows what his models are trained on. He knows their limitations. He has the data. Weinstein doesn't argue with the data. He says something quieter and more devastating. The structure of your argument is sound, but you are preparing for the world you can imagine. Complex systems produce the world you cannot. Then the CEO describes what he actually sees coming. He describes the singularity, the point at which an artificial general intelligence rewrites its own code, produces a smarter version of itself, and that version produces a smarter version still, within days, perhaps within milliseconds. He calls it an end-of-time story. He says he doesn't know how to prepare for it, and Weinstein says something that should stop every person watching this. Then prepare for the more likely world, the one where the system doesn't end time, but quietly makes billions of people irrelevant. This is where our image comes back. The horses of 1900 did not think they would disappear. They thought they were irreplaceable. They had been essential to human civilization for 6,000 years. They had carried armies, built cities, plowed fields that fed empires, and humans genuinely loved them. That part was real. But love and economic necessity are two different things, and in 13 years, every horse in Manhattan was gone. Nietzsche wrote that man is a rope stretched between the animal and something beyond. We have always been a transitional form. Every version of humanity has been a bridge to the next, but never before in history did we ourselves engineer the things standing on the other side of that bridge, waiting. Weinstein gave us the framework, understanding the difference between complicated and complex, seeing clearly what is being built. But there is one thing he did not warn us about directly, and it is the thing that will determine whether you are a horse in 1900 or something else entirely. What happens when you understand all of this and still do nothing? Let's be precise here, and I say this without judgment, only as a dissection. The threat is not AI, not really. The threat is a very specific and very human mechanism, the ability to understand something intellectually while simultaneously arranging your daily life as if it isn't true. You have probably done this already. You read the articles, you watch the demos, you saw GPT-4 write better code than most junior developers, produce better marketing copy than most agencies, summarize legal documents in 30 seconds that used to take paralegal hours. You saw it, you processed it, you thought, remarkable, and then you went back to doing your job the same way you did it before. This is not stupidity. This is the illusion of the threshold, the belief that there is a clear moment when serious begins, and that you will recognize it when it arrives, and that you will have time to respond. The belief that the shift will look like a catastrophe when it starts, rather than like a series of minor efficiencies that quietly accumulate until one day a role disappears from a job listing and never comes back. Weinstein asked the question that nobody in power wants to answer. Is it the fault of the person who spent their entire working life building expertise in a field, the writer, the analyst, the paralegal, the translator, the accountant, that their skills were rendered obsolete while they were sleeping? They didn't choose to be born in this moment. They didn't choose the timing. Is it their failure that the ground moved under them? He says no, but he also says naming injustice does not change the outcome. The horse was not guilty. The horse still disappeared. Here is what I'm not going to give you. I'm not going to give you a list of AI tools to learn. I'm not going to tell you to take a course, build a prompt library, or pivot to a career in data science. That's not the first move. That's not even the second move. The first move is one question. One honest, uncomfortable, specific question that most people never actually sit with. Ask yourself this: Right now, not later. Which part of my work is AI already doing better than me? And how much time do I have before my employer, my client, or the market figures that out? Not your whole job. One part, one function, one type of task you currently get paid for, or that gives you value, or that defines your expertise. Name it. Be specific enough that it's uncomfortable, because here is what that question does. It doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't give you a roadmap. It does something more important. It converts the threat from abstract to concrete, and humans are not capable of responding to abstract threats. We are wired to respond to concrete ones. The horse that sees the automobile is not saved by seeing it, but it is different from the horse that doesn't. It has, at minimum, a relationship with reality. And a relationship with reality is the only place any intelligent response can begin. One question, one function, one honest answer. That is the beginning. Write it in the comments. One sentence. The function that AI already does better than you, or the function you're most afraid it will. Don't frame it. Don't justify it. Just name it. You'll find you're not alone. And the people who are already there naming it, looking at it directly. They are already, in some small but real way, on the other side of the threshold. The horse was not guilty of being born a horse. And you were not guilty of being born into this particular moment in history, with the skills this particular moment no longer guarantees it needs. But we are not horses. We have something they never had. We can see the automobile coming. We can ask what it means. We can choose consciously what kind of transition we want to be part of. The question is not whether AI will change what you do. It already has. The question is who you decide to be in the moment before that becomes undeniable to everyone around you. What that actually looks like in practice, the crossing itself, that is a different conversation.